As you probably know, President Trump has just made arguments, his legal team have just made arguments before the United States Supreme Court addressing what the decision was for the Colorado Supreme Court. And as you probably know, the Colorado Supreme Court issued an order removing Trump from the ballot. Now, Trump appealed that to the United States Supreme Court, and he is making various arguments. Those arguments, I think, are going to carry the day. I think Donald Trump is going to win, and here are his arguments. I'm going to break them down. There are 4 arguments that he makes. 2 of them are really not that interesting. The first argument is that President Trump is not a quote-unquote officer of the United States. And the second argument is that even if he is an officer of the United States, he didn't commit an insurrection as it's stated under law. So let's go through the first argument first, and then we'll go through the second argument. We're going to distinguish the difference between the first one and the second one, and we'll analyze them completely. Here's what you should wait for. The first part of that argument. President Trump is not and never was an officer of the United States. Now, what does that mean? The first part of that is, take a look. There is a distinction between what an officer of the United States is and the oath that an officer of the United States is and what the president is. And we can take a look at the impeachment clause. And if we take a look at the impeachment clause, it says very clearly, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And that's Article 2, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. Now let me ask you this question. Why in the world would you have 3 categories, the president, the vice president, and all other civil officers? The reason is because the president and the vice president are not categorized within the gambit of all civil officers. It's something separate. And if we take a look at what all civil officers entail, they're members of the judiciary, they're senators, they're people in the legislature, both state and federal. And we know that because they take a different oath. The oath that senators take, the oath that members of the judiciary, judges, the oath that state legislatures take, they take a different oath than the President of the United States. Now, going to that argument, there are so many headlines, so many news articles that said that President Trump is arguing that he doesn't have to support the Constitution. What kind of president is he? The reality is that President Trump is correct. The oath that he takes is not one to support the Constitution. The oath that he takes is totally different. And I'm going to read it to you. If we look at Article 4 of the Constitution, we have this phraseology. The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So that is what the senators, members of judiciary, members of the legislature, both state and federal, that is the oath they have to take to support the Constitution. The president takes an oath. The president swears to protect, preserve, and defend the United States Constitution. So his duty, the president's duty, is to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution. If the president had a duty to support the Constitution, why wouldn't they use the same terminology? Why wouldn't the framers of the Constitution say that the president has to support the Constitution? But that's not what they say. They say that he has to defend, protect, and preserve the Constitution. Now, we can get into the semantics of what it means to protect, preserve, and the Constitution as compared to support the Constitution, but those are different words. That is different language. And if because they're different and they're in the same document, the United States Constitution, you have to assume that they have a different meaning. And that's the argument by the Trump legal team, and I think it's the argument that's going to carry the day, because they have to have a different meaning if they're in the same document. And because they have a different meaning, that means that the president is not a quote-unquote officer of the United States because he took a different oath. And because he's not an officer of the United States, here's the kicker. Because he's not an officer of the United States, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not apply to him. So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not apply to him because he's not an officer of the United States. He's not an officer of the United States because he took a different oath than actual officers of the United States. He took a presidential oath. He didn't take the oath as an officer of the United States like a senator or a legislature or members of the judiciary. That's the first argument. And I think that argument carries the day alone. But let's say it doesn't. Let's say the court disagrees and says, no, I'm not looking, that's all semantics. I believe that the president is an officer of the United States. He's got his second argument, and his second argument is really the nail in the coffin. The second argument is very clear, that even if I am an officer of the United States, even if Section 3 of Article 14 applies to me, it doesn't, because I never committed an insurrection. And that's stated under the US Code. Now, it's really interesting that you had all of these prosecutors, all of these people trying to indict President Trump, but no one has ever indicted him for insurrection. And for that, we looked at 28 United States Code 2383. That is the code as it pertains to insurrection. No one has ever indicted President Trump or even investigated President Trump. They've investigated him for everything else, but they haven't investigated or indicted him for insurrection under 28 United States Code 2383. Now, I want to take you to what actually President Trump said, because if we look at what President Trump said, you're going to see exactly why no one ever indicted him. Here's what he said. President Trump told the crowd to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. He encouraged support for our Capitol Police and law enforcement. And on the evening of January 5th, 2021, President Trump instructed the Secretary of Defense to do what's required to protect the American people. So if he said that, and if he made those representations, then President Trump could not have committed an insurrection. He never encouraged anyone to commit an insurrection. He never told anyone to storm the Capitol. He never told anyone to throw chairs, break glass, and hit and violate police officers. He said quite the opposite. Peacefully protest. Respect the police. How is someone saying that insurrection? And then when things got out of hand, he told everyone to go home. He told everyone to remain peaceful. So if you take a look at what was actually said, there's a reason why President Trump was never removed from office for what happened on January 6th. There is a reason why President Trump was never indicted on insurrection charges. And for those reasons alone, the Colorado Supreme Court is ultimately wrong, and the United States Supreme Court should reverse what the Colorado Supreme Court said, because it's very clear he never committed an insurrection under the definition of an insurrection and under the widest extent of what he did. If you take a look at his actual language, there was no claim of insurrection. There was no language of insurrection. So what do you think? Do you agree with that argument? Do you disagree with that argument? If you disagree with that argument, let me know why. Like, comment, subscribe. I look forward to hearing back from you soon. Talk to you later.